YouTube! Today we're going to be checking out the hunt for America's smartest killer, the Unabomber named Ted Kaczynski. Hopefully I pronounced that right. I'm sorry if I didn't. Little FYI, I am sick, so I'll make sure to mute and stuff if I start coughing or whatever. My voice sounds different. I apologize. Nothing I can do about it. Anyways, the Unabomber. See how this guy got caught.
My motive for doing what I am going to do is simply personal revenge. I do not expect to accomplish anything by it. Lincoln, Montana, 1996. This cabin is the chosen home of Theodore J. Kaczynski, more commonly known as the Unabomber. He's long been feared as America's smartest criminal, a serial bomber who's killed and wounded targets across the country with no clear connection. For 17 years, he's eluded the FBI. It's the largest, most expensive manhunt in the Bureau's history. He's the evil genius serial bomber who's killed and wounded targets across the country.
I'm trying to go back and see that.
For 17 years,
here it is.
He's eluded.
That right there is one of the most famous sketches of a criminal ever. Still to this day.
The FBI. It's the largest, most expensive manhunt in the Bureau's history. He's the evil genius they simply can't catch. Likely history's most intellectual serial killer. He's terrorized the nation, instilling fear in Americans about opening their mail and getting on planes. And he did it all from his cabin. Here is where he built his bombs, where he wrote his manifesto, and where he evaded capture for nearly 2 decades. It's where he turned from off-the-grid recluse to world-famous murderer. This cabin contains all the evidence the FBI will need to convict him.
It's just a little cabin in the woods, man. I remember watching a little docu-series about this. Now, sometimes, the TV shows and stuff can kind of not share all the information or kind of bend things for dramatic effect. So, I try to take those shows with a grain of salt. But being able to do what this guy did, just deep in the mountains in his little cabin. Woo! And that manifesto, getting them to publish that.
It's located deep in the Montana wilderness. Back in 1969, Ted moved here from California, where he left behind a shining career as a math professor at UC Berkeley. He wanted to get closer to nature and far, far away from everyone who pisses him off, which is most people. He built this cabin with his brother, back when Ted still talked to him. It's got no electricity, no.
Me and him have something in common to that degree. Trying to move further away from everyone that pisses him off, which is most people. I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Plumbing, just a wood stove, a bed, and a whole lot of books. Right now, Ted is building another bomb. They're meticulously crafted, and he's continuously improving his technique. Every year, they become more lethal. In fact, he's got another one under his bed, wrapped and ready to go. But he won't get a chance to send it, because despite his intellect, he made some pretty dumb mistakes.
Yeah, just for the record there, too, he was working on another bomb. He had one underneath his bed. He had already mailed several out. And each and every time he mailed one out, they were getting stronger and more well-built. It was crazy. They're lucky they caught him when they did before, things may have escalated even further. All right.
Books. Links are in the description. We attribute the social and psychological problems of modern society to the fact that society requires people to live under conditions radically different from those under which the human race
Industrial
evolved.
Revolution. If you ever do want to look at his manifesto, I think the Washington Post or somewhere like that has it posted. You can just Google it and actually pull it up.
Born in 1942, Ted grows up in a pretty average family in the suburbs of Chicago. They're working-class Polish Americans. His parents are politically progressive, bookish and intellectual, and really into the outdoors. They're strict but loving. At least, that's how they remember it. It becomes obvious at a young age that Ted is exceptionally gifted, so his parents push him to succeed. He skips 2 grades and easily aces every class. He's a pretty normal kid for someone with an IQ of 168. Sure, Ted is quiet, shy around girls, and arrogant, but he has a core circle of friends and plenty of hobbies. Like his parents and brother, he loves playing music, reading, and camping. People like Ted. They'll later remember him as a sensitive, respectful kid. All that starts to change when Ted enrolls at Harvard University at just 16 years old. Like many college freshmen,
This dude's 16 years old going to college. Most of us are still like, maybe, hey, we're halfway through high school. We're excited to be getting our driver's license. This dude's a freshman at Harvard at 16 years old. Sharp as a tack.
Ted struggles to adjust. Here, he no longer feels like the smartest person in every room. And as a working-class kid thrown into the world of America's elite, he's a fish out of water. Other students and even faculty mock his shabby clothes and blue-collar background. He's deeply bothered by their snobbery, pain that will follow him through life.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, he's thrown into the lion's den here. 16, he's not ready for this. Psychologically, I would imagine. That would be tough. I mean, you're 16-year-old, you're going prestigious college like Harvard. You're going to be surrounded by people in their 20s who are very mature, grown up. Going to be difficult, obviously.
Ted's also just really young, younger than almost everyone else on campus. As an adult, Ted will write his mother furious letters about this. He demands apologies for pushing him out of the house before he was ready. Ted becomes depressed, and his grades suffer. His classmates describe him as a total loner, moody, rude, and virtually mute. He's that guy on the dorm floor who only leaves his room to go to class, who ignores everyone else, who slams doors. There's a stench of rotting food wafting from his room. Ted doesn't know it yet, but his withdrawn and alienated demeanor has caught the eye of a psychology professor. Dr. Henry A. Murray is very famous, with an on-campus research center named after him. He's basically a god in the social sciences. Murray is looking out for particular types of students, those who will make excellent guinea pigs for an experiment. His final, most elaborate experiment, the capstone of a long and illustrious career. It also happens to be a CIA-funded project designed to cause extreme distress and break down the subject's sense of self.
MK Ultra.
Clearly, we are in a position to do a great deal of damage, and it does appear that the FBI is not going to catch us anytime soon. The FBI is a joke. It's the 1970s in San Francisco. The city is a hotbed of anti-government activity. There's outrage over the Vietnam War. Protest bombings are a regular occurrence. Explosions happen every week up through the mid-80s. The FBI dubs it the Belfast of North America. Radical far-left groups like the Weather Underground and the Symbionese Liberation Army claim credit for many of the bombings.
I wasn't even born yet, just for the record, guys. Wasn't even born yet.
So most of the cases are pretty straightforward in terms of understanding motive and perpetrator. But amidst all of this, the FBI's San Francisco bomb squad makes a shocking discovery. 12 mysterious, similarly built bombs can be linked to one elusive killer or group. They have next to nothing to go on. Just for whatever unknown reason, this string of explosives seems to target universities and airlines. Whoever is building these bombs is an expert crafter and careful to not leave any DNA behind. Not a hair, not a fiber. They're encased in beautiful handmade wooden boxes. There are no eyewitnesses to the bombings, and no letters from organizations claiming credit. The victims appear to be scattershot of random people. The unknown perpetrator is referred to by the code Unabomber for university and airline bomber. So far, his bombs have killed one person and injured 20.
I ain't gonna lie, when I first heard about this and started reading up on it, I didn't know that part. I just thought maybe this guy had a unibrow. I ain't gonna lie, dude. I learned that later, obviously, but just a little funny tidbit of a story there.
others across 5 different states. Unlucky recipients of the Unabomber's early packages include a campus security guard, a handful of graduate students and professors, a secretary, an airline executive, and passengers on a flight from Chicago to DC. Some are injured quite badly. The first death is in 1985, Hugh Scruton, a guy who owned a computer store in Sacramento and was about to get married. What does he have to do with anything at all? Far away in his cabin, Ted reads about his death and chuckles to himself. He hears that the FBI offers a $25,000 reward for any information. He's flattered. The Unabomber is making waves. Not bad for the actions of one man in a 10 by 12 foot shack with no electricity, running water, or phone service. Jars of chemicals for making his bombs, binders and binders full of notes, all kinds of disguises for delivering the bombs, like wigs and sunglasses, and shoes with fake soles. It's crammed to the gills, but meticulously organized.
Dude, it's crazy. The wigs, the sunglasses, different styles of shoes, to adjust his height. Like he was ahead of his time in the criminal field. No wonder he was so hard to catch.
At this point, the FBI has 0 promising leads, and by the end of it all, they'll never actually find the perpetrator themselves. The bomber is always several steps ahead of them. They'll pursue thousands of dead ends, spend hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars, and pour countless man-hours into this case. They have no idea why he's targeting the people that he is, but the bombs are so precise, so well crafted. There's gotta be a motive, right?
The bombs were marked
in 1987, there's finally a break in the case. The Unabomber plants a package outside a Salt Lake City computer store, and a lady spots him. He's wearing a gray hoodie, sunglasses, and sporting a mustache. The police create a sketch and post it all around the country.
There it is, dude. One of the most famous sketches of all time.
The bombings immediately stop, and for 5 years, nobody hears anything from the Unabomber. All kinds of people call in with tips, but the leads go nowhere. The case pretty much goes cold, but the FBI know that it's only a matter of time.
Now, the bombs were marked with something, wasn't it like FG or something like that? Freedom Group? If I'm not, that could be wrong. But it was marked with like 2 letters for meaning something similar to that.
Before he'll strike again. They're sure he's using the time to perfect his bombs. And they're right. In his cabin, Ted is finessing his technique. The upcoming bombs will be a whole lot more lethal. But, as the world will soon find out, he is also busy writing. He doesn't just want his explosives to do the talking. He's crafting a manifesto, one that claims to explain what the mysterious string of bombings is all about. The technophiles are taking us all on an utterly reckless ride into the unknown. Back at Harvard in 1958, the United States is experiencing huge shifts in culture. The button-up 50s are drawing to a close, and the nation becomes swept up in the space race, the civil rights movement, the sexual revolution, the environmental movement, the explosion of drug culture, and all the while, the Cold War is escalating. The American military is paranoid that communists have developed mind control drugs and brainwashing techniques, and they're eager to catch up, so they're covertly experimenting with ways to manipulate behavior. U.S. intelligence officials are especially interested in developing a perfect truth drug for interrogating enemies, and they believe LSD might be it. But they're also testing a wide range of ways that psychological manipulation could bend the will of anyone to do whatever the U.S. military wants.
So LSD was supposed to be the truth serum. I never knew that. That's what they were going to use for the truth serum, some LSD. Like these people were going to be tripping, dude.
They've even enlisted help from the Nazi scientists who experimented on Dachau inmates with hallucinogens and interrogation methods. The military illegally smuggles these war criminals over to get their advice on brainwashing, as part of Operation Paperclip. Over the course of at least 11 years, thousands of Americans are subjected to unethical psychological experiments that include sensory deprivation, hallucinogenic drugs dosed without consent, subliminal messaging, hypnosis, electroshock therapy, and even ice pick lobotomies. And that's just the stuff we know about. When the project becomes public knowledge in the 1970s, the CIA director orders most of the records to be destroyed.
I bet he did. Oh my God. Where were they doing this at? Like, I know MK Ultra obviously is taking place at some parts in Harvard because of what we're about to see here. But some of that stuff I didn't know. Like, was it just like random people, like patients or something? Like in a hospital?
The program is codenamed MK Ultra. Many of the test subjects are vulnerable populations, like prisoners and hospital inmates, but also students. Students are prime subjects for these experiments because of their frequent contact with professors who play a big part in MK Ultra. Some of the professors know the role they play. Many don't. During the post-war period, the CIA becomes the largest employer of college professors, and the military is by far the biggest source of funding for psychological research. Professors acted as consultants and researchers for military-backed projects. They used their status to encourage their students to participate in experiments, often involving drugs like LSD. Afterwards, they reported back to the government. Harvard becomes heavily involved in Army-sponsored studies. One of the CIA's main men on campus is the superstar psych professor, Henry Murray. Murray is well known for his studies of personality, and since the CIA's beginnings, his theories have influenced how they recruit new agents and how they interrogate suspects. When Murray and young Ted Kaczynski cross paths, Murray is at the end of his career, and he recruits Ted for his final, most elaborate experiments. They're meant to assess the effects of stress and harsh interrogation on gifted male students. Murray wants to know, what will it take to break an educated, intelligent man? The setup is simple.
I feel like that would be a weird one, though, because, like, you know, it's not like Ted here is, you know, a 19, 20, 21-year-old young adult man, whatever you want to call it. He's 16. Like, he's a mid-teen. He just now can drive. Like, I feel like it would just be so much easier to break a person like that. I feel like it's a weird test subject.
Ted and 21 other students are asked to write an essay about their most deep-seated beliefs. Then they're told they'll discuss their beliefs with a fellow undergrad. The experiment aims to compare the effects of stress on college men who seem psychologically healthy and well-adjusted, with students who seem alienated, pessimistic, and lacking in identity. Ted is most likely recruited for the second group because he's showing signs of depression. Ted's personal essay stands out as the most pessimistic of them all. It suggests that he was already vulnerable before the abusive test began. He is also the youngest and the poorest in the group. The students are told this exercise is just to study different personalities. In truth, now the real experiment begins. The essays are handed to lawyers trained in manipulation, who are instructed to attack the values expressed in them. The students endure harsh interrogations in brightly lit rooms. They face calculated personal critiques designed to humiliate and erode their sense of self. All the while, electrodes monitor their stress responses. Later, they have to watch these stressful and humiliating moments on video, over and over again, for 3 years. As Murray himself describes it, the tests were designed to be abusive. He's had a lifelong fascination with pain and stress, and is known to have a sadistic streak.
Wait, this went on for 3 years? Like, these students involved in this study had to go through this for 3 years? How's that even possible that this lasted for 3 years?
Many of participants will later report the experience to be deeply unpleasant, with lasting trauma. But Ted's response is,
I mean, these young people were belittled and personally attacked continuously for 3 years. I bet they are traumatized. What?
are the most extreme in every category. Murray's team identifies him as the most traumatized of all. Yes, Ted Kaczynski got MK Ultra'd. You can read all about it at CIA.gov. In consequence, many claim the CIA created the Unabomber, but that's an oversimplification. It's not so easy to prove how much effect the experiments had on Ted's turn to terrorism. None of the other students in the experiment are known to have become killers. Some psychologists believe the experiments were stressful enough to create anger problems in Ted, or even aggravate latent schizophrenia. But other psychologists evaluate him as undeniably sane. Ted himself dismissed the idea that the tests were anything resembling psychological torture. he was very invested in being seen as psychologically healthy until the bitter end. He's taking great pains to not be painted as damaged or crazy. He wanted his murders to be understood in the context of his beliefs, not his personal history. If people saw his actions as a result of trauma or madness, it would invalidate his ideas. Ideas that formed his last year at Harvard. Ted becomes increasingly disillusioned with the industrial technological system. He comes to believe that technology is slowly destroying humanity and eroding our freedom. He's horrified by widespread psychological suffering and how industrial technology has severely damaged the planet. He's certain that it'll only get worse the more technology develops. So anyone who helps advance technology in any way is the enemy. Scientists, engineers, business people, what Ted calls the technician class. Ted starts having revenge fantasies and becomes obsessed with how society enforces obedience with psychological controls. He daydreams about breaking away from society and living off the grid. Ted graduates Harvard and goes on to get his PhD in math at the University of Michigan. He's quickly establishing himself as a brilliant mathematician and is offered a tenure-track position at UC Berkeley as their youngest professor ever. His students don't like him very much, but he's publishing groundbreaking papers on boundary functions. But Ted resigns one day without warning. He tells his family that he's done with teaching math to future engineers who will advance the industrial technological system and continue destroying the planet. Ted buys a bit of land near Lincoln, Montana, and builds a cabin with his brother. He's ready to escape the advanced technology that surrounded him at UC Berkeley. He wants to live a simpler life, far away from everyone.
Dude, I think we've all been here before. Just want to get away, move off somewhere, a little log cabin back in the woods, and just exist at peace. Hey, I think I can't say all. I think a lot of us have been there. Something's got, where they don't, I guess, technically blame MK Ultra for him turning into a murderer. I'm not going to put the blame totally on that, but there's no way you can disregard that and think that, it didn't have some part to play with. I mean, you got a young man here who you already know is troubled, and you're going to harass him about that for 3 years straight. And the manipulation on top of it of you have a young man who's isolated and he finally thinks, hey, these educators here who I admire and think are brilliant are taking me in, and then just at the end to further have that crush that you were just part of an experiment, you were nothing. Yeah, the psychological damage there is heavy, to say the least.
He's ever known. And then, he starts to build his first bomb. Through our bombings, we hope to promote social instability, an industrial society, propagate anti-industrial ideas, and give encouragement to those who hate the industrial system. In 1993, the Unabomber strikes twice after a 6-year hiatus. Two prominent researchers, a computer scientist and a geneticist, receive packages the size of a VHS tape. The bombs detonate upon opening, and both professors are badly injured. Shortly after, the New York Times receives a typewritten letter. It claims credit for the bombs and says the public should expect more to come. In 1994 and 1995, the Unabomber succeeds in killing 2 people with his mail bombs, an advertising executive and a forestry lobbyist. As feared, his explosives have become notably more sophisticated. Bombings are usually accompanied with demands for money or some kind of action. What made the Unabomber so difficult to understand and to find is that his bombs never came with any requests. They seem to be built only to cause fear, injury, and death. 17 years after starting his bombing spree, the Unabomber finally makes his demands known. He writes the New York Times again, announces that he will permanently desist from terrorist activities if they publish a 56-page manifesto. The request kicks off a fierce debate within the FBI and the newspaper, to publish or not to publish. The FBI has a clear policy to not negotiate with terrorists, but they also believe he'll honor his promise and stop killing people.
Yo, look, I'm sorry at that point, we have no idea who this guy is. We're not able to put an end to his antics. and he gives you a way out. Now, I know the thought there is also that, he won't comply. Worst case scenario there, he doesn't. And if he doesn't, it wasn't like he wasn't going to mail that thing anyways. You mail his manifesto. You publish his manifesto. And worst case scenario there, maybe you get him to stop and you have time you have the time to, investigate it. He's not active, so he's not hurting anyone, hopefully. That's the way it would have played out. And now you have more information to go off of to better investigate, figure out who he is, and bring him to justice.
After all, this is what the bombs were seemingly for, to force people to pay attention to his views. Plus, they still lack leads. If the public reads the manifesto, someone might be able to identify the Unabomber.
I didn't think of that. That's needs to be taken into consideration.
So the manifesto is published. The FBI decides it should just be the Washington Post, though, because it has fewer readers and the newspaper's stance will be easier to surveil. So they think. Interest in the Unabomber is huge. Newspaper sales hit a record high that day, with lines snaking around the block. Across the country, Americans are eager to finally read what the Unabomber has to say. The manifesto opens with an iconic line. The Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. And though the manifesto is an argument that calls for dismantling industrial society, it's also, unwittingly, a self-portrait. Within its pages, the Unabomber has accidentally unmasked himself. David and Ted, though 7 years apart and very different, grew up close and loved each other very much. As adults, they had impassioned philosophical debates by mail and shared a lot of the same views. David also worried about technology's destructive effect on humanity. He'd also spent some time living off the grid in a self-made cabin. But David wasn't a killer. When the manifesto is published, he hasn't spoken to his brother in a long time. Ted cut him out when David got married and refused to answer any of his letters. David's wife Linda, a philosophy professor, has a funny feeling about Ted, whom she never met. As the bombings stack up and some of the timings coincide with Ted's travels, Linda tells David, "You've got a screwy brother. Maybe he's the Unabomber." David doesn't want to hear it. Linda doesn't...
Wait a minute. How, if he's not responding back to his letters, how do they know about his travels and stuff?
know Ted the way David does. He'd never kill anybody. As a kid, Ted used to cry at the thought of animals getting hurt. But when the manifesto is finally published, David avoids reading it. He doesn't want to admit the similarities. That, like the Unabomber, Ted is an excellent carpenter, and that he had a lifelong fascination with explosives, and that some of the dates match up perfectly with Ted's travels. David only reads it when Linda insists. His jaw literally drops from the first few lines. The killer, like Ted, also hates technology. As it continues, David recognizes idiosyncratic word choices and logical arguments that Ted uses all the time. There is no escaping the truth.
Oh no.
Ted is the Unabomber.
Is his family about to turn against him here, boys?
So after some moral qualms about betraying his brother, David alerts the FBI.
Wow.
They are bound to make me out to be a sickie, and to ascribe to me motives of a sordid, or sick type. Many tame conformist types seem to have a powerful need to depict the enemy of society as sordid, repulsive, or sick. Lincoln, Montana, April 1996. With the tip from David, the feds are staking out Ted's cabin. The investigation is meant to be conducted quietly, but they're interviewing local townspeople, trying to collect more evidence on Ted. Right now, all they have is the linguistic similarities in the manifesto and old letters from Ted that David gave the FBI. Not exactly cold, hard proof. Enough for a search warrant, but not an arrest. Rumors start to spread around town that Ted Kaczynski, their very own angry hermit, is the Unabomber. The plan is to draw Ted out of his cabin.
I guess if word's spreading around town, they probably got, well, I guess they're keeping tabs on him. They knew he hadn't left the cabin. Lucky word didn't get around a little bit, you know? Lucky it wasn't no cell phones back in the day.
And get inside before he can escape or destroy any evidence. But they don't know if he has it tricked out with explosives. Nobody would be surprised if he did. Ted has no idea he's under surveillance, so when someone knocks and says some land surveyors need to talk, he believes them and opens the door. He wasn't expecting visitors. These days, he's busy with a dirty job. He's in the middle of rasping aluminum blocks to make powder for more bombs. He's covered from head to toe in the dust. He's rail thin because the rabbit hunting was scarce this season. Ted's hair is wild and his clothes are literally rotting off of his body. But what does he care? He's not trying to impress anyone, and he can clean up fast if he needs to blend into society. Too bad for Ted. He'll be photographed in this state, filthy, emaciated, and in severe need of a shave. The image will
Hey now. Easy.
circulate around the globe and will not help Ted's desire to seem sane. When the feds swoop in, they find 40,000 pages of journals and plans, most written in code. The code is more complex than anything the FBI had ever seen, more convoluted than codes the KGB used during the Cold War. But Ted also left the key to the code in the cabin. Without it, the FBI wouldn't be able to decipher the decades of written confessions that definitively tied Ted to the bombings. They also find a bomb under the bed, ready to be mailed to an aerospace company in Dallas. Now the FBI
So even though they published his manifesto, he wasn't going to stop. He was invested. But that manifesto, by them publishing it, like we had talked about earlier, did help them catch him. So
FBI has all the evidence they need. They lock up the cabin and take Ted to prison. He does not dispute that the journals with the confessions are his. In fact, he wrote them partially so that nobody would try to say he was crazy. Ted's family and his defense team attempt to convince the jury and the world at large that he is mentally ill. They're doing anything they can to avoid the death penalty, which frustrates him. He tries to fire his lawyers and defend himself. He would rather die than allow his lawyers to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. Ted...
Oh, well, that was actually true. I heard his lawyers kind of threw him under the bus a little bit, too. I don't know how true that is, but I heard that was a little bit of a shady deal. Like, his lawyers, without his consent, were like going and working with the FBI to, I guess, essentially help their case.
pleads guilty to his crimes and is sentenced to life in prison. Behind bars, he never stops writing. He publishes 2 books and keeps up a lively correspondence with a wide array of journalists and admirers. He also finally makes some human connections. He strikes up a friendship with Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber.
No shot. I didn't know this. The Oklahoma City bomber. Hey, wild one about this guy, dude. It wasn't too long to track this dude down. Well, let me rephrase that. It wasn't too long after the bombing took place that he was going down the road, and they actually traffic stopped this guy and put him in like a little city, county jail. That's wild. I didn't know McVeigh and Ted had any form of communication. That I guess that would explain why he did what he did.
1995. Ted and McVeigh are briefly on the same prison block and find they have a lot of views in common. Before
they weren't just like riding each other; they were on the same prison block. What did? Oh man!
McVeigh is carted off to death row.
Oh,
Ted even finds love for the first time in his life.
Fact.
After a lifetime of struggling to connect with women, never going beyond a few kisses, Ted suddenly has dozens of women writing him romantic or salacious letters. But only one captures his heart, a school teacher he calls his lady love. They spend thousands of hours talking by mail or in visiting booths, but they are never able to touch. He writes classical music for her before she dies of lung cancer. Later, Ted also develops cancer. When the condition becomes advanced, he dies by suicide in June 2023 at 81 years old.
81.
This is not to be a political revolution. Its object will be to overthrow not governments.
Well, I do got a little. How do people who, like, you know, these famous killers, are they just wanting it for the fame? Like, why did they do that? Why did they go after these dudes that are like, you know, they're locked away in prison for the rest of their lives for like crazy violent crimes? And some of these women are just head over heels. They send them money for commissary. They go and try to visit, write them every single day. Dude, that blows my mind.
but the economic and technological basis of the present society. In the decades since his arrest, Ted Kaczynski continues to fascinate and sometimes inspire. The manifesto's central argument is that technological advancements since the Industrial Revolution have robbed people of their freedom and well-being.
FG, there it was. You guys seen it, right? It was signed. Freedom Group.
These advancements are supposedly responsible for widespread psychological suffering and environmental devastation. It's a revolutionary call to dismantle industrial society altogether and warns that technology will inevitably overpower human autonomy. Many of Kaczynski's observations in the manifesto are true. Some of his predictions are prescient, and a lot of the grievances are understandable. It's not hard to find people who are also frustrated with surveillance or sad about environmental destruction. At the time of his capture, Time magazine wrote, "There's a little bit of the Unabomber in most of us." Nowadays, Ted Kaczynski continues to find admirers online, from teens on TikTok, depressed about climate change, half-ironically saluting Uncle Ted, to the extreme right mass murderer, Anders Breivik, who heavily quoted Kaczynski's industrial society in his own manifesto. But even if most people can find parts of the manifesto they agree with, most people are not willing to kill. Kaczynski knew that most people would be repelled by his crimes, but committed them anyway. Those who find the ideas compelling might want to check out Jacques Ellul, the thinker whose ideas most inspired the manifesto. The philosopher never advocated killing. They also should check out Ted Kaczynski's diaries. They lay bare the personal motivations that drove the Unabomber, beyond the manifesto that was polished for public consumption. Technological society really did seem to anger Ted, but Ted was also very, very angry, in general. In his diary, Ted Kaczynski writes that he was happy to kill innocent civilians. He took pleasure in causing people pain. He killed at least 9 dogs just because they barked too loud. He hated leftists, he hated doctors, he hated women. He fantasized about killing them just for rejecting him. He fantasized about killing his neighbors just because they annoyed him, including a toddler. He condemned technology as slavery and glorified simpler times that ran on actual slavery. Kaczynski wasn't even much of an environmentalist. He made fun of them in his diaries. He littered proudly. He poached illegally. He logged unprotected lands. You might get the sense that he only used environmentalism as a post hoc justification for his murders. A cynic who identified ecological concerns as the most acceptable excuse for killing.
Yo, great video by Fern. I'll have a link to it in the description below. But holy moly, dude. I think next I'm going to actually find a video to watch with MK Ultra, because I'd like to know what happened with that. You know, whether you believe that it played a role or not in how the Unabomber played out. There's no doubt that a lot of these people ended up being psychologically affected by it. No doubt. No doubt in my mind. Yeah, they didn't turn out to be killers, but man, each person is different. You don't know what stage they're at. You don't know what they're capable of. I feel like they didn't take these things into consideration, and they knew they had a young. He was out of place. You know, you got a 16-year-old boy. He should be in high school, learning how to drive, hanging out with his friends. No, he's at the University of Harvard in college, surrounded by 20-some-year-old people and, all these prestigious professors and things. Man, like, it's already rough. Like, he's not going to fit in. There's not much that a 16-year-old boy and a 22, 23-year-old man are going to have in common. And that alone is going to present its own problems. Then you take a little bit of resentment from, his parents who made him do this. They shipped him out to college, and he knows he feels out of place. They know he probably feels out of place. But, granted, they're just trying to look out for him and set him up for the best life possible. But he just wasn't psychologically ready for that change in environment. It's crazy. But I do want to know what happened further with MK Ultra. I haven't done much research into it. I just knew that previously they'd done some shady stuff, right? Obviously. Ted obviously, he had a rough patch there. You're skipping grades. You're getting away from your original friends. That's a lot to process. And, being in an environment where you're forced to be a grown up way sooner than what you probably should be, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. Do I think it played a role? I do. I feel like some of that definitely helped push him over the edge, if you will. Imagine, you're already upset, you're kind of mad at the world, and you're already having these thoughts, and then you finally get accepted into something. One of these prestigious professors takes you in. You think you're finally, finding your ground to walk on, and just you get belittled for 3 years straight, talked down to. You still try to hang in there to fit in, and then just to have that professor pretty much, at the end there, just be like, "Hey, man, you're just part of the study, brother. You're of pretty much no importance to me." Had to be soul crushing for him. Had to be. So they can say what they want to about MK Ultra, whatever. I think it definitely, at minimum, played some form of a noticeable part in making Ted Kaczynski into what he became as the Unabomber. Him writing that manifesto was like probably, obviously, I'm pretty sure he probably didn't plan on getting caught via that manifesto, but that's what done him in. It's the one thing the FBI wanted. Imagine had he not sent that in and he kept doing what he was doing. Because the technology, obviously they didn't have what we have today, and he was off the grid, man. It's untelling how long he could have gotten away with that. But sending in that manifesto, it just so happened that his brother and wife and his brother's wife, they're able to read that, put two and two together, and it was all downhill from there. Um, Obviously glad he got caught. He wasn't going to quit like he said he was with his publishing of this manifesto. So glad they caught him, got him to justice. Uh, Anybody that doesn't know, definitely go have a look at his diary, his manifesto, and do a little bit of research too on his attorneys. There, I'm gonna actually look back into it because it's been a while. But that was kind of some shady business there as well. That was some shady business. Kind of weird. Alright, guys. I am Cheap. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. We'll catch you in the next one.